Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Today, this afternoon, we are having a great personality from the field of medicine, Dr. K. Lakshman, sir, who is a gastrointestinal surgeon.
Good afternoon.
Sir, one of our interns today, this Dr. afternoon, Sresht will be introducing Dr. Lakshman, sir.
A very good afternoon, one and all. Today we have with us a very eminent, highly qualified general surgeon with a charismatic personality, Dr. K. Lakshman. Born and brought up in Bangalore, sir did his UG from Bangalore Medical College. His JR-ship is from PGI Chandigarh. His qualificational portfolio includes LRCP, MRCS from London, VQE held by ECFMG Board, US, FRCS from Edinburgh, Flex by Massachusetts Medical Board, and LMCC by Canadian Medical Board. Sir has worked as registrar and honorary clinical tutor in general surgery, Aberdeen, UK. He was awarded fellowship in surgical metabolism and nutrition at 5th Howard Surgical Service at Boston. He has brought his clinical and professional acumen at various institutions like NACO, RGHS at various positions. Other than his professional contribution, he has worked hard at a personal level for the benefit of the medical fraternity and the students' body by setting up a digital library and a seminar hall at BMC, conducting workshops, panel discussions at national and international conferences. Sir, we are honored to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Can I start? A very good afternoon to all of you. I hope I'm audible and you're able to see my slides. Can you hear me? Can you see my slides?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, hearty congratulations to all of you youngsters who have achieved a tremendous feat in getting through your exams, and now you're at the cusp of becoming interns, full-fledged doctors. It's no mean feat, and I think all of you should be very proud of what you have done. Very, very few people in society achieve this feat, and my congratulations to you again. I would also thank Professor Patil and his team at BLDE for giving me this lovely opportunity. It is always very nice to interact with young minds. The operative word, mind you, is interactive. So I will hope to finish well in time, well before time, in fact. And I would like all of you to ask questions, agree with me, disagree with me, make comments, and we should have an interactive session which makes it interesting and lively. A monologue from my side with a lecture with a lot of slides, however colorful they may be, serves no purpose. So friends, please stand up or sit where you are and talk and comment, and that way we'll have an interesting session. The topic given to me is professionalism and ethics. It's all very, very good learning about medicine, surgery, pediatrics or whatever else. But common to all disciplines in medicine is professionalism and ethics. And I think it's time that we put our mind to it and see what these things mean and what we should learn from these aspects of our life as medical professionals. The main thing, I think, is the skill to have a good judgment and to have a degree of behavior which is expected of a professional. That is the main thing. Society expects you to behave in a particular way, and you need to understand what that is and keep those high standards, and if possible, exceed it, so that you have a good standing in society. If you look at the professional attitudes as given by, say, universities worldwide, here I quote a definition from the United Kingdom universities. It says the same thing, but in a little more detail, and says you have to have high standards, have a good code of conduct, and that code of conduct is different for different professions. Nevertheless, each profession has its own code, and you need to understand what that code is and keep to it. What will happen as we go along is I'll give you practical examples, true stories of my own experience of various situations. And I'm sure when you start practicing, you will come across similar situations or maybe even more complicated situations. And then this thought process and analysis of how one would react in the background of professionalism and ethical behavior would stand you in good stead. I hope all of you have heard about William Osler. He's a Canadian physician. He from Canada, from McMaster University. He went on to this Johns Hopkins in Baltimore in the US and ended up in Oxford University, UK. The 19th century physician, prolific writer. He is the one who set up the residency program for medicine in Johns Hopkins at Baltimore. Please, when you have free time, after you're done with your day's work, perhaps even watch something on Netflix, spend 15 minutes each evening, perhaps for the next 3 months, reading about what William Osler has said. These are called Oslerisms. He has written extensively, and he's one of my favorite authors. The amount of thought he had, the high level of thinking he had, and the calling he had. Calling is something which is not a job. It is something that comes from within you. It is inherent, and you just follow that voice within you to be good and to be noble. And once you understand what Osler is saying, I think all your job as a doctor, your requirement as a doctor is met. So please read Osler. One of the things that happens most, and perhaps the most difficult for youngsters to understand and follow, is the self-sacrifice and purity of thoughts. Many times, you will come across situations where you have given your life and blood to a given situation. And you will find that the person who is a recipient of your goodness is completely the opposite. He is not at all grateful. In actual fact, he may well be aggressive, he may be abusive, and he may be very bad to you. That is when the challenge comes to you as a doctor. You need to have purity of thought, understand that you have chosen this noble profession, and continue to exercise self-sacrifice. These are all very big words that we say, but what happens is when you start practicing, when you see the suffering of humanity and see what a great skill you have as a doctor to alleviate that suffering even to a small extent. And you will also see that a lot of people are actually very grateful to you. A lot of people are grateful to you. Okay. And so the minority of people who sort of, if I may say so, spoil things for you should not depress you. That is the important thing. I see that the large silent majority, I call them silent because they don't express themselves. Here I'm giving you a quote where somebody has expressed their gratefulness to the doctors. But a large majority of people don't even express it, but you know from their body language, you know from the way they look at you, you know from the way they talk to you, that they're really grateful to you for what you have done to them, for the help you have given. Is that the reality? Largely so. Or is this the reality? Day in and day out, you see in the papers, doctors being beaten up for no fault of theirs, doctors being abused, doctors being trolled in social media. Is this the reality? I don't think so. I mean, it is there, but every society has a few bad apples. Among professionals, among doctors, you have bad apples. Why not accept that? So among people, among your patients, you will have bad apples. But That should not put you down. I think the reality is somewhere in between. You don't have the whole world being nice to you. You don't have the whole world being bad to you. The majority are nice to you, but the minority are bad to you. That's where your purity of thought comes into play. And the things that hold you at that level, the things that help you get through your day to day life, in spite of these adversities, are altruism, virtue, professionalism, and ethical behavior. Over the next 30 minutes, I'm going to spend some time giving stories. All of them are true stories, so that you understand what each one of these means. And once you do that, these qualities, when you exercise in your professional life, in your life as a doctor, will definitely protect you, and it will also help you get through adverse moments. Believe me, you will have bad days as a doctor. You will have good days. You will have difficult days. You will have easy days, but that is life. Understand that what gets you through the bad patches are these qualities. I completely disagree with Pellegrini's statement. He is a professor of medicine in the United States. He is a very well-known bioethicist. He says that in a free market economy, altruism and virtue have no place. I disagree. I have myself worked in private practice all my life. I can tell you, I have seen many colleagues of mine around who are practicing the highest levels of virtue and altruism in spite of being in so-called free market economy. What it needs is your individual application. What is this application? It is to think of others more than yourself. It is as simple as that. I'm a high altitude trekker. I go to the Himalayas. We trek at 15, 16,000 feet. It's hypoxic, very tiring. And the group of 15, 20 trekkers will have people of all ages. I'm one of the oldest in the group usually. And you find some youngsters who are hardly in their 20s, perhaps your age, very young people who are coming there, who are obviously more fit and more energetic than oldies like me. And we will have 3 or 4 of us in that group as well. You will find some of them, not all of them, always thinking about us. They are a few feet ahead of us, but then they come back, they keep looking back and see how we are doing, how we are coming. That thought process where this guy, young guy who should be running and going ahead of everybody else, he stays back, looks back and see how if he can be of some help to a person who needs that help. That is altruism. There is nothing more than that. And people say that it elevates you spiritually. Okay, and that I have experienced it. It's a great feeling. Dalai Lama is one of my other favorite authors. He is what I call an religious leader. He never ever pushes Buddhism as a religion. He is a Buddhist monk. Never says Buddhism is better, do this, become a Buddhist, become this, nothing at all. Anything that he speaks, you find a lot of his speeches on YouTube. Kindly spend some time and listen to them. Several of his works are available on the internet free of cost. In your spare time, after all the fun you have had, even though you're young, I suggest you read them. I can honestly tell you that at your age, I was reading these things, at least a little bit. You'll find that his mantra for happiness is altruism. And I cannot agree with him more. What is virtue then? Virtue is, in very simple thing, doing what you think is morally correct. Let me tell you a practical example that many surgeons face. You are in private practice, you're working in a hospital or a private nursing home. A general practitioner sends you a patient with abdominal pain saying it is acute appendicitis. Okay, the patient comes, he is convinced that he has appendicitis. He is convinced by the GP himself and perhaps the nursing home owner that he needs an operation. You are the surgeon at the nursing home, you're not the owner perhaps. then you go and see that it's not appendicitis. Okay. Now, your virtue comes into being because at that point in time, you should not operate when you know that it is not appendicitis. Perhaps just give him some deworming, give him some painkillers, wait for a day or two and see what happens. Now, this is a very difficult situation for you, where you must have the courage of conviction to say that it is not appendicitis. Why do I say that? In fact, one of the nursing home owners actually asked me this several years ago. What is your problem, Dr. Lakshman? The GP has told you that he has appendicitis. The patient is happy to have an operation. You come and tell the patient he doesn't need an operation. He has to wait for one or 2 days. He is unhappy. As a nursing home owner, I am happy for you to operate. Why are you not operating? The simple answer is it is not appendicitis, according to me. I am a professional. Hopefully, I am a virtuous professional. So I do not do things which are not indicated. As simple as that. So please understand that this thought of virtue is nothing new. From time immemorial, from the time civilization existed, Confucius says, man, the superior man, thinks of virtue. Mahatma Gandhi said this, the path of truth is always difficult and is full of thorns. So please understand, don't take the easy way out when you are in a moral dilemma. You may say it's very easy for you to say that at your age, sir, but we are youngsters. We are in a fiercely competitive world. If we don't do what others do, we get left behind. No, please take it from me. Even if you do when you do what is right, even if others may have a temporary march over you, in the long run, you will definitely win. You will have the respect of your colleagues and your patients. So my message to you is very simple. You are now embarking on an exciting journey. Stories around you, newspaper articles, all these social media, WhatsApp messages, Facebook, you name it, they bombard you with a lot of negativity. My simple appeal to you, ignore these negative thoughts. You're now old enough and responsible enough to take independent, firm decisions. Go by what your heart says. Remember what Osler said. Medicine is not just head. It is head plus heart. Go where your heart says, but keep your heart in the right place, being virtuous, being altruistic. Please note that learning medicine is very important, but equally important is to be professional and ethical. Equally important. And I find, presently the National Medical Council and many other professional bodies are stressing ethics and professional behavior. They are teaching people what are called soft skills, but I think it's not enough. I think we should do a lot more. And I personally would be talking, I'll be very happy to keep talking like this, even though management of gallstones or pancreatitis or a cancer colon is equally interesting. I think that enough people do that. And some of us, maybe even some of you youngsters, must take up interest in these soft skills. The American College of Surgeons, I would recommend that chapter. There's a textbook of surgery by the American College of Surgeons. I would recommend that you read the professionalism chapter in that book. And I have taken all these things from that book. Learned discipline is definitely important for you to be professional. You need 7 basic characteristics. These are listed on the left side of your screen. I'll go through them one by one. Being learned, being evidence-based is very important. Okay, I had one of my registrars who went in and blindly did a laparotomy for an uninvestigated abdominal pain very recently. If he had done it 25 years ago, I would have said fine. Then he had actually done it in the institution, and we were a bit concerned about it and gently asked him, look, what is the evidence that you have here to open up this patient? He had no evidence. All he said was, sir, we have done this before. I have in my training, that's why I did it. That is something which is not learned. Now is a time, you finished your exams. Now is a time that you go back to the books. It may be very, very contradictory when I say this, but as an intern, when you see a case, go back to the books, whatever subject it is, pediatrics, medicine, surgery, whatever. Go back and read up about that particular disease and its differential diagnosis and its present day management. Learn about what is evidence, what is levels of evidence, what is rational treatment. Then do what you have to do. Okay. As an intern, I have always had, in surgery, of course, the Washington manual in my pocket. Have some book like that. Keep looking it up so that you get the right kind of information. And once you read up about the case that you have seen, you hardly ever forget it. The next important thing is to understand this. The difference between a professional and a non-professional. There are many definitions I have given you two earlier, but the real difference to me is this, that a professional does not need policing. You do not need somebody to look over your shoulder for you to do something right. It is as simple as that. You are self-motivated to be doing the honest thing, to be doing the correct thing, to be ethically, professionally, which means medically and socially correct. You do not need a policeman for you to be good. You have to work towards that. Remember this. It's extremely important. I've talked about altruism. This is altruism in another way. You place yourself in such a position that you are there to serve others. In fact, I think talking to you about this in this particular juncture would be superfluous. I have seen the whole medical profession rally behind patients in these difficult days of pandemic. I have not seen any person who says, I will not do doctoring, I will stay home because there is COVID around in the world. Most of us have really done an excellent job. And I take my hats off to these people, all of you youngsters. I'm sure you have done your bit too. All of us collectively, medical profession has stood by it. And why is that? That's because we have had the responsibility of serving others, and we have put it well above self-interest. And that is the main thing. Commitment to excellence is extremely important. Extremely important. I'll tell you a little story about this. I worked for a gentleman called Norman Matheson, a very, very well-known thyroid surgeon in the northern part of Scotland. He had written books about thyroid surgery. And I had the good fortune of being his registrar. I'll tell you, he must have done hundreds of thyroids by the time I joined him as his assistant. Even at that stage, when everything to my mind was going very well, this guy would be raving and ranting at the nurse, sometimes at me. And I was wondering, why is this guy shouting the operation is going so well? It took me 2 weeks and 10 thyroids later to realize that his problem was that he thought it was abnormal to lose more than 10 ml of blood. Mind you, 10 cc's of blood in an open thyroid operation. This was 35 years ago. Look at the amount of commitment he had and the commitment to excellence he had. He would really be extremely agitated. And, I was wondering why. And he set himself an extremely high standard. And mind you, most of the time he could meet that standard. Personal integrity is something which is extremely important. Again, it comes not because somebody is supervising you, but it happens because you want to be honest. It hurts me. We do a lot of studies in a hospital. We ask our students to, collect data. And, I'll give you a classic example. You have two kinds of analgesia after a laparotomy, for example. And then we are comparing the pain scores, what we call the VAS scores. That has to be done twice a day on day one, first 9 o'clock the first morning and then 9 o'clock in the evening, perhaps once a day after subsequent days. Now, this boy or a girl, my resident, my postgraduate student who has to go and do that, misses it. I mean, I can even understand if they miss it and they say, sir, I'm sorry, I couldn't come at 9 p.m. yesterday and get the painkiller. But they don't just leave it at that. They put some score there the next morning. That is dishonesty. That is lack of integrity. That cannot happen. I find I have zero tolerance for this. And I've had to ask them not to include such patients in our study. As it is difficult to get our subjects in our study. But then when these people do that, we write down and say, look, we are excluding this because our data is inadequate. Because I think the wrong data is a hell of a lot more dangerous than inadequate data. Also remember that you as a doctor is a role model. You are the leader of a team. You will have a lot of nurses working with you, a lot of junior doctors. If you're in a teaching institution, a lot of students, paramedical staff, even the housekeeping staff. They all look up to you as a leader and you're a role model. And if you're not honest, if you're not straightforward, and if you're not professional, and if you're not ethical, how do you expect to get any work done out of these people? So these days when you were a student and when you could have fun and take things lightly, honestly are gone. As an intern, you are a doctor, a full-fledged doctor. Very soon you will get your full certification. So remember that you are a role model and you really have to keep up to that level. And again, we come back to Ostler. Your being professional is a calling and it's a privilege. You look at society at large, how many people can become doctors? Very few, very few. And so you are a privileged class, and for you to have reached this stage, while you must be very proud and happy, you must also shoulder the responsibility. So when you see it as a calling and not as a job, you will understand this. Just this morning, we were honoring a very senior surgeon called Dr. Srimurthy. He's done a lot of service to pediatric laparoscopic surgery in the country. He's one of the leaders. And Surgical Society of Bangalore honored them, and I have a lot of respect for him. So I went and we honored him, and he was just saying one simple thing. And the simple thing was this: look, we are a gifted, privileged lot, and we have to give it back to society. He is also in private practice, but he says, I have never let any patient go because he cannot pay. I may be in private practice. Money comes. There are people who pay. There are people who cannot pay. But those who cannot pay never go away because they cannot pay. I call them and say, look, how much can you give me? This is the standard bill, but how much can you give me? I will take whatever you give and I'll do the operation. He said, the point is, get the job done. Help this guy. You have the skill, you have the capacity, help him. The money will come by itself. He was talking to us and I thought he was so right. And that comes only when you see your work as a doctor as a calling. It cannot be a job. And that is the important lesson that you have to learn. Just a few words about ethics before I stop. Now, ethics involves professional conduct. It is very, very closely related to professionalism. Each one cannot exist without the other. All right. And if you look at books on ethics, or if you read articles on ethics, they'll tell you it has 5 major issues: code of conduct, doctor-patient relationship, doctor-doctor relationship, care of the terminally ill, and death and dying. The last 3 in this, I will not talk about today for lack of time, but I think it's correct to think about code of conduct and a doctor-patient relationship. And after I finish that, I will stop this. The code of conduct is something that we have been taught about for ages. You have taken the Hippocratic Oath. 400 BC is the way it was dated. See, everybody from the time of civilization will tell you the same thing. You will see that my next 5-6 slides, I am repeating the same thing over and over again. It may even bore you. But you will see that as society has evolved, newer and newer things have been added to the code of conduct, because society is evolving and newer issues are coming to the fore. Hippocrates always said, do not practice for gain and respect your teachers. I think two fundamental things that he said is something which is true even today. Definitely do no harm. If you can't do good, that's fine, but definitely don't do harm. So when you take action, when you ask for a test, when you prescribe a medication, when you admit a patient or reject an admission, every single act that you do, have this in the back of your mind. Am I harming this guy? If the answer is anywhere near slightly yes, hold back, think again, and then do what you have to do. We jump from 400 BC to just after the Second World War, where the Nazis ill-treated Jews, Nazi doctors, I'm sorry to say, ill-treated many Jews and carried out highly unethical experimentation, medical experimentation on Jews in Germany. You must have heard of the Nuremberg trial. And when all that happened, then there was the World Medical Association meeting in Geneva, Switzerland, where they said, apart from everything else, there must be a conscience. Your conscience must be directing you. It is another way of saying self-regulation. Other way of saying, do not expect policing. And then they thought of confidentiality. The first time in 1948, patient confidentiality is paramount. They tell you a lot of intimate things which they would never dream of telling anybody else. As a doctor, you get to know those things. You have to respect them and respect the confidentiality. Again, at the same time, race, religion, nationality, again, divided humanity. Completely wrong. We as doctors should completely put aside all these things, race, religion, nationality. He is a patient, he is a human being. Your approach is the same. It has nothing to do with anything else. Respect human life. This they pushed under the question of euthanasia. There is still a school of thought. There are certain parts in the Netherlands, certain states in the United States, and some parts of Australia where euthanasia is allowed, but it is allowed under very strict conditions. But by and large, I think knowingly killing a patient is something that is not approved of. And that is where people say you must respect human life. And that's where there's a lot of debate on abortions as well. So the so-called pillars of ethics are very, very simple. Non-malfeasance comes first. Do no harm. I mentioned it. Benevolence, do good, comes next. Fairness, or just behavior, it is called. Fairness. I don't know if any of you would have seen triages. What's called a triage. If you will, when you go to the casualty department, you will see it. And I think it's one of the most difficult things for a doctor, doing a triage, but you are expected to do it. What is a triage? You have, say, 20 casualties coming to you at one time because of a disaster. Obviously, you can't look after all 20 of them. So you classify them. The walking wounded don't need any care at all. Okay, the guys who need urgent care, who are severely damaged, they need preference. They get in here, they get into the hospital quickly. They get all the emergency workup, IV fluids, workup, there's that. You correct their, take them for a laparotomy if required. But the sad part of that, this is where the fairness comes, is those who are beyond salvage. It's a very difficult decision for a doctor to make. I've been in those situations before. This guy is so severely injured and is one among 15, where you know that even if you try very hard, you're not going to save him. In that case, you're called upon to say no treatment for this patient. He's alive at the time you're seeing, but you know that he's going to go. That is a difficult situation, but yes, it is a part of life. This is where the ethical principle of fairness comes. There's another way of saying it. Do the largest good to the largest number of people. Largest good to the largest number of people in society. So if you, for example, spend all your ICU money and all the resources that you have, even physical resources and the ventilator on an 85-year-old, and then because you don't have a ventilator, deny it to a 34-year-old breadwinner of a family. Where is the justness in it? Where is the fairness in it? So as a doctor, you will be called upon, and then you then have to say, I'm sorry, I can't give the only ventilator I have to the 84-year-old. I will give it to the 34-year-old because he will, hopefully he will survive, and he's a bread earner to a family. Yes, it is very sad to see the 84-year-old go, but that's life. That is the ethical principle of fairness. Tom Duncan, you see, I'm sitting with Tom Duncan, who was one of my most revered teachers. Whenever I talk about professionalism or ethics, I always remember Tom. He's still alive. I keep in touch with him. He's in the UK. We exchange emails at least once in 3 months, even now. He gave me a very simple thing. One day I was his registrar. I saw a patient who was in a lot of pain. Okay, but I wasn't sure. I was not even very experienced at that time. I had done my fellowship, but wasn't experienced. I called Tom and said, look, I don't know whether I should open him up or not. Perhaps you could come and see him, and this, we can decide whether, but he's in a lot of pain. He's not getting better even after 5-6 hours of analgesics and all that. So he told me at the end of the phone, he used to call me Krish. Krish, just think of that patient as your brother. If it's a lady, maybe your mother, it may be your sister, whatever. Think of that patient as a near and dear one to you. If you would operate on your brother, if this were the patient and you would operate on your brother, you operate on this chap, go ahead and do it. You will be right. Very simple ethical test. Very simple. So whenever you see a patient in a clinic, look at them as your near and dear one. And if you would ask for that test, do that operation, give that medicine, or whatever, do it. You cannot be far wrong. I'm forever grateful to Tom Duncan for that very simple test. Doctor-patient relationship has to have trust, respect. Trust comes with honesty. Very important. We had a patient who was to have laparoscopic closure of a PERF DU. And on that day, for whatever reason, because of a malfunction of a valve, we didn't get carbon dioxide flowing into our operation theater. And strangely, we didn't even have another standalone. It was a central pipe thing. And we didn't have a standalone carbon dioxide cylinder for us to use during surgery. So we had to open the patient. We did the job. Things went bad. That's a different story. But at the end of that operation, my assistant told me, sir, what should I write as the cause for opening the patient, sir? I said, you don't have to ask me that question. You know what it was. So we wrote in the case sheet that because of lack of carbon dioxide flow, we had to open the patient. Because that patient had complications, in fact, the patient went to court and said that because of this, the patient had complications. It's a different matter that I proved to everybody that whether you do it laparoscopically or by open surgery, the complication rate of PERF DU treatment is the same. That's a different matter. But in your mind, you should not have any doubt as to whether you should write the honest truth in the case sheet or not. There is no point, because when you write something which is dishonest, you lose the respect of your team. They know, they will have seen what's happened. Second, somebody will squeal, somebody will talk. Then you lose the respect of the patient. Forget about losing respect. They get extremely angry because you're not honest with them. So you will end up with more and more problems. So be honest. Informed consent is an extremely important thing. If you talk to them nicely, particularly for doing an operation, if you talk to them and get an informed consent, the chances of you having a problem are very, very few. Particularly, I would be talking about risks involved. Just because we feel that the patient gets scared if we talk to them about complications, we never tell them about complications. They wrongly go home thinking that everything is simple, hunky-dory, and everything will be fine. But you and I know that there is a small but finite complication rate for every operation that we do. From removal of a from a sebaceous cyst or a circumcision to, anterior resection for cancer rectum. There is some complication rate. Unless you mention it to them, they will not know. And just because you think the patient will go away, there is no way you're justified in not discussing the risks involved. Most of us are not this, but I put it up for the sake of completion. An incompetent, arrogant, greedy doctor with very little commitment is a dangerous doctor. We are not that, I know, but I think for the sake of completion in a talk like this, I thought we should put it up. But doctors are not the only guys at fault. In fact, most of the time it is not the doctors who are at fault. It is perhaps the system or the infrastructure or even the patients. But my advice to you is that you do not expect the high standards that you keep for yourself from your patients. They may be misinformed. They may have unrealistic expectations. They may threaten you with going to court. Don't get angry. It doesn't happen at your age. When I was your age, or even older, for example, up to my mid 30s perhaps, I used to be very angry if the patient did not listen to me or did not follow what I told him to do. But afterwards, it took me 10 years of practice, as it were, to realize that we cannot expect from them what the standards we keep for ourselves. So try and be patient. Don't be as lazy or as backward as I was. I took 10 years to reform myself. Maybe you can reform yourself in 1 year, or maybe straight away if you're good. So be patient. And one very simple fact we have to understand is that a doctor-patient relationship goes beyond social, economic, and fiscal considerations. He's all the same, whatever position he is in. I must tell you about Dr. Jagannath, who operated on Amitabh Bachchan when he had that accident when in Coolie, when you're shooting that film Coolie. He became very famous, nationally famous. And a few months later, somebody asked him, how do you feel, you operated on Amitabh Bachchan? He said, I mean no disrespect to Mr. Bachchan, but I felt a lot happier when I treated my patients in Tata Memorial. He was a surgeon at Tata Memorial some time ago. A lot of poor patients came there and got operated by him. He was very open and said, no disrespect to Mr. Amitabh Bachchan, but my happiness came when I operated free of cost with no exposure to anybody. He would have done hundreds of operations on these unknown people. But at a personal level, his happiness was because he had gone beyond the social and economic status of the patient. Remember, friends, that really is the crux of the matter. And finally, I leave you with this excellent quote from Winston Churchill, which is very important on your bad days and when you had failure. Success is not final. You succeed sometimes, you fail sometimes. Failure is not fatal. Everything is not lost even when you fail. But whatever the circumstances, the courage to continue is what really counts. I wish you very, very well with the best of luck and the best of life for you as doctors. And please understand that apart from your medicine, your professionalism, in terms of the knowledge and skills that you carry with you as a doctor, have professionalism and ethics as an integral part of your life. Thank you very much for your patient listening. I would very much like comments, agreements, disagreements, and questions from the students and the staff alike. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Talk was very encouraging, very guiding to our interns. Sir, you said about the good judgment, polite behavior, to follow the code of conduct. Sir, you also said medicine is an art, not a trade. Doctor should not be a businessman. Sir, you also said about self-practice, purity of soul and purity of thoughts. Sir, these all words will be really inspiring, guiding our interns, sir. Sir, at last you said one thing, to be patient, to be courageous, and not to get disheartened with the failures, which will definitely be guiding words to our interns, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? I'm sure there are very learned people around. Would they be adding to what I said or having any issues with what I said? Is there any arrangement for students to ask for questions?
Hello, sir. It's Ananya here.
Yeah.
So I just want to thank you for this inspiring message you gave us today. We got to learn a lot of things and knowledge coming from a person like you who's seen it all, who's been through it all. It actually matters, and to know that we are in a profession which deals with a different kind of responsibility. So it was a very inspiring session, sir, for us.
Thank you.
And we will hopefully we'll keep everything in mind, and we hope to become like you one day, sir.
Thank you.
Hello, sir. This is Shresht here.
Hi.
Sir, there's one question I have.
Yeah.
It is regarding, sir, you said that we should be very, very professional, and even if the patients are not talking properly and they're not behaving well, we have to be like professional in our attitude, and you have already addressed it. But sir, the current circumstances, the way the patients, attenders have been behaving, and the kind of hatred we are seeing, sir, how actually, like, for a person it is normal to be, matlab, you understand, right?
How can you be normal and patient and nice? You know, it is a challenge. It is a challenge. I'm not saying, at this age, I'm not saying I'm good at it. To be very honest, I also lose my patience at times. There is no two ways about it. But have this in the back of your mind that our relationship with our patients is not on equal footing. You would want, everywhere else in society, there is the relationship between, say, a vendor and a customer is on equal footing. You pay some money for a car and you expect a good car, and the car is not good, you sue him. Now, it isn't as simple as that in medicine, unfortunately. The patient is suffering. There is a huge emotional component apart from the physical component, a huge fiscal component. Many times they don't have the money to get the kind of health care that they need, and that frustrates them, angers them. And so while I'm not expecting you to, stand there and get beaten up, stand there and be shouted at or be abused, I'm not saying that. But don't give it back in kind, and you try to be as good as possible under the circumstances, and have all protection that you need. Have the system and the institution must give you physical protection. Rest of it will look after itself. But yes, it is a big challenge, and it won't happen overnight. It'll probably take you a decade or two before you sort of get a handle on these things.
Good evening, sir. Gaurav here.
Hi, Gaurav.
Sir, thank you for a very inspiring speech. It was a pleasure listening to you, sir.
Thank you.
Hopefully, we'll be able to inculcate whatever you have spoken today in our day-to-day routine and in our practice. So I just had one question from you, sir. like now we are in the training phase, sir. Like we'll have seniors above us. And if suppose a circumstance arises where the seniors ask us to do something that goes against our ethics, then how should we, like, what should we do? Yeah.
Very, very good question. My simple answer is talk to your senior and say that you're uncomfortable doing whatever you're asked to do because you feel that it is unethical. It is not wrong to disagree with your seniors, but how you disagree is what is important. I'll give you a very, very simple example for this. Okay. My chief in the UK, when I was a trainee, had the habit of giving whole blood in the immediate post-op phase if the hemoglobin was less than 12 grams. All right. In those days, I'm talking about 35 years ago when I trained. Now, the concept of component transfusion had come right then in the UK. It came much later in India. But the blood bank would never give you whole blood unless you went there personally and justified the reason. Trauma, for example, who is dying and who is about to be taken to the operation theater, they would release whole blood. Otherwise, they always said packed cells. My chief would not want packed cells. He wanted whole blood. The second problem there was, even then, even though it was in infancy, it is well established now, but in the UK, even at that stage, the blood bank officer felt that the trigger for transfusion was 10 grams percent, not 12 grams percent of hemoglobin. My chief differed. I was stuck in the middle. He would say, I asked you to give blood. Why didn't you give blood? So what do? So I went and spoke to the blood bank officer and arranged a meeting between the blood bank officer and my chief. I requested my chief to have a meeting with the blood bank officer. I just stood there, okay, quietly, and then the two of them had a chat. And then my chief asked me, do you agree with what he's saying? My chief, I said, yes, sir, I do. How do you say that? I said, sir, I'll show you a couple of references which have said that now we are looking at packed cell transfusion, not whole blood transfusion. Send me those references. Okay, simple. So I went to the library. Those days, no emails and all that. I Xeroxed these references and left it on my chief's table. And the thing was sorted out. But the beginning of the whole thing was my chief being very unhappy with me for not doing what he asked me to do. All right. So you will find your ways of getting around these difficulties. And even if your chief is rough with you for what you didn't do, he will introspect. Every human being introspects. And he might be harsh on you on a given day, but he will go home and think, yeah, this, Gaurav, I think was right. Maybe I shouldn't have chastised him. And he will, the next time he meets you, his respect for you would have gone up. He may not show it outside, but inside of him, I'm 100% certain he would respect you more.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Good evening, sir. Sir, I'm Pooja. Thank you so much, sir, for your inspiring words. So my question to you is, I wanted to ask that if a patient feels that he is not comfortable with the doctor or the doctor does some mischievous things, he tells the doctor or puts the accusation that he did an infamous conduct with me, and the NMC deals with it, right? The NMC has the power to snatch away our license, and then we can't practice for like so and so years. But if vice versa happens, if the patient beats up the doctor, there is no such stringent law as per the government rules. We are treated as civil citizens only. Then we are put behind the bars, and they easily flee away with, like, even after beating us, there is no such stringent law that they could remember that something like this, if it happens and we beat the doctor, what could be the worst of the consequences that they could face. So why is the government not taking enough initiative to support the doctors? And like, we have an NMC built for such a thing for us, but why is the government not taking enough initiative to educate the public about such circumstances, that you also should be behaving in such and such way with a doctor?
Very valid question, but I have to correct you there to say that in the last year or so, there are laws enacted where if you beat up a doctor or destroy the property of an institution, of a hospital, you can be put behind bars and levied heavy fines. It's possible. But is it being done is a question. What happens is that everybody in society, everybody feels that this is all done in a phase of emotional turmoil. There is no justification, but that's what people do. And so cases are not hoisted on these, they're criminals. There's no other word for it. Police go soft on them, judges go soft on them. They then go and apologize. After doing the damage, they apologize and cry in front of the judge and they are let off. That shouldn't happen. That's where the society has to mature. That has not happened yet. It will. But yes, there are laws which can punish people who damage property and doctors. That is there. But I'll tell you what needs even more attention is this business of going to the medical council. All right, just a letter from a patient to say that I did something which is incorrect or unethical will call for an investigation against you. You can't keep writing letters to them. You hire a lawyer to represent you. I'm telling you, it costs you thousands of rupees, if not lakhs of rupees. You probably get no money from the patient, or if you did get some money, it would be 5,000 rupees, 10,000 rupees, or whatever. You end up spending thousands of rupees on the lawyer and the hassle that you have. But unfortunately, the society expects an abnormally good kind of behavior from the doctor. And that is why I'm saying you and I as doctors may not accept it. You see in the WhatsApp so many things which say, look, we took an emergency decision and you now penalize us because it was a wrong decision. You did the wrong operation or whatever in an emergency situation. You have a blessed judge in the district court. He takes 5 years to give a judgment, has all the time to talk to all the specialists. He gets the judgment wrong. The same case goes to a high court, and then that previous judge's judgment is overturned on the basis of the same evidence. So how can you expect us to be superhumans? That is a debate that's going on in society. And so they are saying there must be a consumer court against lawyers, against judges, and against everybody else. It's not happening. I agree it should happen. But, again, I console myself by saying that, look, I chose medicine as a profession. And, I've done about 40,000 procedures in my career, and 6 people have gone to court against me. Okay. To the consumer court, to the medical council, 6 people. Look at the proportion, 40,000 versus 6. I think on balance, that's why I told you, in spite of hearing all the negative things, I have many of my colleagues who tell me I will never ask my son or daughter to take up medicine. I say I disagree with you because I see them as my very happy medical colleagues. They've had a good life. Society has given you a lot of comfort. A large majority keep you, on a pedestal, even now. Okay, not as much as before, but still you are considered special. Be happy with what you have and ignore the negative feelings, negative experiences. It's all very easy. It comes very easy at my age. I know for a youngster like you, it's difficult, but you will recall these words 30 years later and say, yeah, I think he was right. Yeah.
Hello. Sir, I'm Dr. Lakshmi Kakhanki from Department of Microbiology.
Right.
So tell us something, how our interns have to face the failures.
Yeah. Very good question. I mean, I can only tell you, quote Magic Johnson. He was an extremely famous basketball player. He just said one simple thing. Very successful, made a big name in the world, made a lot of money, considered very successful. He said, I have failed many times. That is why I have succeeded. Okay. You look in your papers, in all the information that you get, at the success of people. Nobody announces or publicizes failures, but every human being, believe me, you, every single human being will have failed several times. And these are all cliches. People keep on saying, takes failure as a stepping stone of success. Cliche again. If one door shuts, 10 doors of opportunity open. Okay. These ring hollow, but again, believe me, these are true. I can only tell you experiences from my own life, which helps you. I was doing great as a surgical gastroenterologist in a hospital which was then considered predominantly cardiac. Okay. So corporate hospital has, fiscal considerations. And what happened one fine day, for no known reason, because they wanted one more theater to do cardiac surgery, because cardiac surgery generates more money than gastrointestinal or general surgery. They told me that I cannot operate during the day. I can only operate at night. Now imagine the cardiac surgeon works from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and if I have to do my operation, it'll be after 6 o'clock. Who wants it? I had already spent 14 years, built a name for myself. People knew that I was available there, and I was concerned. What will happen if I leave? But I didn't have a single moment of hesitation. I resigned the very next day. When they asked me to do that, I resigned from there. I said, something will happen. People will come wherever I am, if I am good enough. And sure enough, you won't believe it. In the next year, if I look at my statistics, my practice actually increased. And I then realized what had happened. The hospital had the reputation of a cardiac center. So the hardcore loyal patients of mine used to come there for GI surgery. Whereas when I went into the world, wide open world outside this cardiac center, more and more people came to know about me as a GI surgeon. So my practice increased. So it is actually true. It's not a cliche. It is actually true that when one door shuts in your face, 10 others open. It is the simplest thing. Have confidence, be positive, work hard, be honest. Nobody can take away anything from you.
Thank you, sir.
Isn't it time? The next session is supposed to be at 4:15. I think we've even exceeded.
Yes, sir. Sir, Dr. Arvind Patil.
Sir, good afternoon.
I've known you for last 20 years in every conference, and you are the role model for every young surgeon as well as seniors who listens to you. And you are very honest, and everything you tell on the face, whether they accept or not, that we have learned from you. And I'm sure just you have inspired us. A journey has begun, but to mold them, it requires more of a number of sessions with you. So I request you to fix up some Saturdays where you feel comfortable. But more sessions so they are mentally right in their way when they footstep after their master degrees. So they are tuned and they follow the right path. And let us prepare such doctors also. Let us not only prepare doctors with high standards, let us also prepare them with a lot of morality and the guts to face the challenges in a big society and a large democratic country like us. So I request you to have a continuous session, series of structured sessions with your timing convenient to you from Bangalore, so that by the end of the year, you will see this bunch of doctors. I'm very proud, my young 2016 batch who are very, very, these things are dynamic and they want to learn. And we have seen today in morning skills labs, they have, in fact, I have not been able to have lunch in the afternoon. What is that next year I have to teach them? Next batch which comes. The challenge again today was that it was eye opener for me. So I request you to, not apart from the medicine and surgery, the model doctor, as we have seen you from last 20 years, I request you to honor us and have a session, sir, on a different occasions and different things. And I'm sure with the active involvement of my 2016 batch, we will definitely be a nation building effort, as you have already built and groomed a lot of people. And I just want to tell youngsters, sir also is involved in a lot of social activities. He's supporting an old age home where he goes personally on Saturdays and Sundays. He spends time with them. He's a more of a societal person than a very good surgeon. So there are a lot of things to imbibe from him. And my request only to sir, please help us this whole year so that one model we create so that it becomes easy for others to also imbibe such things. And when they see my own doctors in different hospitals, the other juniors also will learn. So I'm looking for a long-term sowing a seed where my doctors become a model for others. Automatically the multiplicity becomes more. So and you are very much humble and very honored that you will be definitely helping us, sir. I request with both folded hand, support us in this cause.
No, you shouldn't. I must thank you for the opportunity. I must congratulate you on your very noble and extremely important task that you have kept for yourself in guiding these youngsters. And it will be my privilege to participate on a regular basis, sir, anytime. It will be my
I'll give
privilege.
the structure to you, sir, so that I will not put, because you are very much senior and you have seen world in a Western, Indian, all contexts you have seen. You structure a program for the students and we'll have a paper at the end of this thing that how this molding could be a model for others. And when they join in a post-graduation and they become a doctors, they'll be imbibing a lot of character from you, and automatically the whole Indian scenario of medical science changes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. It will be my pleasure and privilege. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Lakshman, sir, for
Thank you.
joining with us.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you and bye-bye.